Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. We continue our journey in volume number 1 of the Book of Heaven. Last week, it was all about trusting Jesus. Actually, the last paragraph that we read, Jesus was very emphatic to Louisa, and he told her, "Don't you know how much I love you, and that everything I allow, either through creatures or on the part of demons or directly from me, is for your true good and serves for nothing other than to lead the soul to that state for which I have chosen her." So today we're going to continue on that same thought, because these paragraphs that we're going to read have to do a lot about trusting Jesus. So let's start reading. "After this, I did as much as I could to resign myself to the will of God, although many times I was put in such constraints by creatures that at times I would do nothing but cry. The time also came to have me visited by the doctor, and he judged that it was nothing other than nervous issue. So he prescribed medicines, distractions, strolls, cold baths. He recommended to my family that they watch well over me when I was surprised by that state, because he said, 'If you move her, you can break her, but not fix her.' Since when I was surprised by that state, I would remain petrified." So here Louisa is talking about those states that surprised her, and in those states she remained petrified. And he talks about the family that was they were concerned about her health, and that they called the doctors, and the doctor recommended medications and strolls and cold baths and distractions. So a war arose on the part of my family. They prevented me from going to church. They no longer gave me that freedom to be by myself. I was watched everywhere, and so they noticed it more often. Many times I lamented to the Lord, saying to him, 'My good Jesus, how my pains have increased. I am deprived also of the things dearest to me, which are the sacraments. I had never thought I would reach this point, but who knows where I will end up? Oh, please, give me help and strength, for my nature is failing me.' Many times he would deign to tell me a few words. He would say to me, 'I am your help. What do you fear? Don't you remember that I too suffered from all kinds of people? Some had one opinion about me, some another. The holiest things I did were judged by them as faulty, wicked, to the point of telling me that I was possessed. So much so that they would look at me with surly eyes. They would keep me in their midst, but unwillingly, and would plot among themselves on how they could take my life away the soonest, for my presence had become intolerable for them. So, don't you want me to make you similar to me by making you suffer on the part of the creatures?" So here we have Louisa, right? That she is suffering because her family didn't let her not even breathe, I would say. They watched her everywhere. And they didn't let her go to church, to mass. And that was very painful, right? to her. And then Jesus is telling her, well, you know something? I am here to help you. Don't fear. And then he told her, well, you know, if you're suffering that, please look at what was done to me. I did all what I needed to do, but people didn't understand what I was doing. They judged me, and I suffered many, many things, right? So at the end, he says, don't you want me to make you similar to me? So he's telling her to be like him by making you suffer on the part of creatures. I don't know if Gladys wants to say something or Gabby.
All those who want to follow the truth path, that is Jesus, we will have to suffer persecution from our family, people, even from the church itself, because precisely by following the truth, we will be intolerable to the other people, because we will not be according to their ideas, but to those of Jesus. If we want to be like Jesus, we have to suffer all this with him.
Mm-hmm.
And be like him in everything.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting, right? Because Jesus put everything aside. He didn't look at what the creatures, other people were doing to him.
Mm-hmm.
He put aside all that because he had only one thing to do. That it was several things to do. One thing that he did all his life was to repair, right? To repair for all of us, humanity, and to redo us. And that was that's what he did. So if there's one of in other volumes, there's a lecture that says, that if I would be looking into the creatures, what they did to me, I would have run away. But I didn't run away. I did what I needed to do. And what I did was to love. And it's beautiful, right? That we have that Jesus is telling her, don't you want to be similar to me? It doesn't matter. Don't look at them. Just look at me and be similar to me. And there's another lecture that has to do with the sacraments that I would like to read a little bit of that one. It's volume 1169, but it's a beautiful lecture, volume 1164. And it has to do with the sacraments, right? Then Jesus was telling Luisa about a mother that does not go to church because she has to take care of her children. And then he says, on the other hand, there may be a mother who does my will and who, because of her situation, not because she does not want to, cannot receive me every day. And one sees that she is patient, charitable, and carries the fragrance of my Eucharistic virtues within herself. It is perhaps the sacrament, or rather my will, to which she is submitted, that keeps her subdued and makes up for my most holy sacrament. So Jesus is telling her, in other words, this is happening to you because I want this to happen to you. Because the sacrament is okay, but being me with you all the time in the divine will is even more than going to church. So this is something that is coming from me because this is part of your purification. That's how I see this part. And also she was attached to Jesus, right? Going to mass every day. So he didn't want her to feel that attachment. I forgot where I was at. Oh, so I spent several years suffering on the part of creatures from demons and directly from God. At times, I reached such bitterness from creatures and from the way they thought that I was ashamed of being seen by anyone, so much so that my greatest sacrifice was to appear in the midst of people. The blushing and the confusion were such that I felt dazed. There were more visits from other doctors, but they came up with nothing. Sometimes shedding bitter tears, I would say to him with all my heart, Lord, how public my sufferings have become, not only to my family, but also to strangers. I see myself all covered with confusion. It seems to me that everyone is pointing his finger at me, as if these sufferings were the most wicked actions. I myself am unable to say what has happened to me. Oh, please, you alone can free me from such publicity and let me suffer hiddenly. I pray you, I implore you, answer me. Sometimes the Lord, too, showed he would not listen to me, and my pains would increase. Other times, then, he would compassionate me, telling me, poor daughter, come to me, for I want to console you. You are right that you suffer, but don't you remember that I too? Oh, how much more I suffered. Up to a certain point, my pains remained hidden, but when the will of the Father came for me to suffer in public, promptly I went out to meet confusions, opprobrium, scorns, to the point of being stripped naked in the midst of the most numerous people. Could you imagine a confusion greater than this? My nature greatly felt these kinds of sufferings, but I had my gaze fixed on the will of the Father, and I offered those pains in reparation for many who commit the most wicked actions publicly, with open eyes, boasting about them without the slightest blush. I would say to him, Father, accept my confusions and opprobrium in reparation for many who have the insolence to offend you so freely without the slightest sorrow. Forgive them, give them light, that they may see the ugliness of sin and convert. I want to make you to share in these kinds of sufferings. Don't you know that the most beautiful presents I can give to the souls I love are crosses and pains? Are you still a little girl in the way of the cross? Oh, you are still a little girl in the way of the cross. This is why you feel too weak. We can just uh, comment on this part here. If somebody wants to say what what you have learned in this part of the lecture. Well, in this case, right,
But
Jesus. Go ahead.
I think, do you know that the most beautiful presents I can give to the souls I love are crosses and pains? How many times have we asked God to take away our sufferings, crosses, pains, and He is telling us the opposite, that they are the most beautiful gifts that He can give us. Of course, because all the sufferings that we can have purify from ourselves and sanctify us. So the cross, it's beautiful for us. And we need to love the cross. We need to love the pains. We need to love the contrarieties. Everything we need to love. Because with these crosses, we can purify all our souls. but that he says we are children of the cross and we need to grow up and love suffering. Love suffering, I think this is a difficult word to understand. But the cross that make us similar to Jesus and unite us to him in everything. So for me, it's the biggest gift we can have because the cross is love. And everyone who loves God needs love the cross. That's the true love. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, and that is so true. And I just remember that Dr. Tomasini has given us the definition of suffering, right? That is a movement of our will. That it's what we want and what we cannot have, or what we have and we cannot want. So it is very interesting because there are some other lectures in the Book of Heaven. Like, for example, there's one in Volume 4 that Jesus speaks about the crosses of the loss of illusion. So what he means by that is that he gives us the crosses that we need, and they are shaped to our perfect measure. And he gives us those crosses to surrender to him, right? And to avoid later on, at the end of our life, the judgment of God. So if we surrender to those crosses, we're going to experience an eternal joy. But if we just run away of those crosses, well, even though we might be saved, we are going to spend, there's no time there, but we are going to go to purgatory. And that is to purify ourselves, our soul, in purgatory. So if we accept those crosses here in life, in his will, and we live those crosses in him, with him, and for him, well, that is going to give us like a ticket that is a ticket to heaven, right? And the other thing is that there's another lecture that talks about the resurrection. There are 3 types of resurrections of suffering. And one is the graces that God gives us in those, if we surrender to those crosses, the sanctity that we are going to get when we surrender and we love those crosses. And the third resurrection is the resurrection of the voluntas tua, that everything will be done as it is in heaven, but to be done in this earth, but in the earth of our soul, right? In the earth of our humanity. So Jesus was he pointed out something very, very interesting. He said that his humanity, let me see what's exactly the word that he used. That in his humanity, he felt those sufferings, but he also had his gaze fixed on the will of the Father. And that is something that he is, as he is teaching Luisa, and he's also teaching us to be similar to him. Doesn't matter if we feel these crosses, if we feel these sufferings, that we should keep our gaze fixed on the will of the Father, because it's going to be good for us, right?
I remember.
Go ahead.
No, Penelope?
So let's point out what he says. Don't you know that the most beautiful present I can give the souls I love are crosses and pain? So let's remember that when we are uh, going through things that are very painful, let's remember that he gives those to the ones that he loves. And it's very difficult to understand at that point. And he also explains why. You are still a little getting the weight of the cross. So the more we read, the more understanding we have, the more light we see, and why we need to suffer in order to look like him. So it's very important for us to spend time reading. Otherwise, we are going to stay little girls. So we want to get to the point that we are stronger. And for that, he says, once you have grown up, and we grow up by reading and receiving the light that he's trying to give us through the writings from Luisa Picarreta, through the Book of Heaven. The more we read, the more we understand. And sometimes we need to read the same thing. Like I have read this book number 1, I don't know, maybe 5 times. And I keep reading and I keep finding little things that I didn't see the first time. But all those things are helping me. So when I go through pain and through crosses, I remember that. And every time it's like, I don't feel the same way like at the beginning. I feel stronger because I understand. I cannot say that I am at the point that I can say, God, I want to suffer. But if I am suffering, I know that it's because God loves me. And He's using that pain to save souls and to give light to others and to purify myself. So this doesn't happen overnight. This happens through constant reading and a constant relationship with the Lord, trusting that whatever is happening is for the best, and never saying why me, because that means that is what uh, how you call it, pride. When people come to me and say, this is happening to me, why me? Immediately it comes to my mouth, pride. You need to work on that. That's what God is trying to show you. And you cannot get that unless you read and read, because He's telling us, like, we have the recipe here. He tells us what the things that we need to do, we need to give up. And He puts in our hearts, okay? It's not that nobody has to tell me that I have to give up this or that. He infuses those feelings in our hearts, and little by little we are giving up all those things that we were before. I remember Dr. Tomasini saying, I'm not telling you to quit that or to quit this. You will acquire, how you say it, that you don't like that anymore, and you yourself will take yourself out of that situation. This happens because the relationship with God, the relationship by reading the Book of Heaven. If you don't read, you don't get, you're not going to get it.
Thank you, Penelope. And that is so true, because like while you were speaking, it's like suffering is like making us similar to Jesus. But not only that, He says, do what I do. Look at what I'm doing and do it yourself, and do just like I did, right? In my divine will. And He says that because suffering gives us life, gives us the life of Jesus. And again, this beautiful lecture in volume 6, that it says what the suffering contains. And suffering contains grace. It rises us to grace. Because when we suffer in the will of God, and we carry the cross that He is giving us, that is good for us, gives us a lot of graces, and it also rises up to sanctity, to a beautiful life of light in His light. And then at the end it says it forms a beautiful crown in the soul of who suffers, because it rises again, that soul, to glory on earth and to glory in heaven. And that is what we say in the Our Father. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as it is in heaven, to be on earth. And it's the glory on earth and the glory in heaven. And it's so beautiful when we understand that Jesus is giving us His life to live it with Him and to do exactly what He does, or what He did 2,000 years ago. And what He did was that, it says it here, it says, talking to the Father, He said, accept my confusions and opprobrium in reparation for many who have the insolence to offend you so freely, without the slightest sorrow. Forgive them, give them light, that they may see the ugliness of sin and convert. See, this is the way we should be acting in the divine will, is doing exactly what Jesus does, and is repairing for everyone, for all generations. And that is going to, in a way, to force Jesus to push out all what He has, all the virtues that He has, and to let that soul have a light to see the ugliness of sin and to convert. Of course, if that person wants to do that. But this is exactly what Jesus is telling us to do as well, what He was doing when He was here. And it's beautiful because in this first volume, He is starting to give Luisa a little hint of what He did and what He wants her to do with Him.
Remember another reading when Jesus tells us that if angels were capable of suffering, they will come to the world to suffer. And they know the value of suffering. And we must learn this value, because it elevates us to the spiritual plane if we are willing. It gives us light, it gives us true life, and unites us to God. The cross makes us strong and fills us with love.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the cross is so precious. And all the suffering, it's a great gift.
It's exactly what it is, the greatest gift of all. After I spent some time in this state mentioned above, about 6 or 7 months, the sufferings increased more, to the point that I was forced to stay in bed. Often that state of losing consciousness multiplied to the point that I would almost not have 1 hour free. I reduced myself to the state of extreme weakness, my mouth clenched in such a way that I could not open it at all. And in the few free moments I would have, I was able to take just a few drops of some drink, if I managed at all. And then I was forced to bring it up because of the continuous vomiting that I have always had. After I remained about 18 days in this continuous state, they sent for the confessor so that I could confess. When the confessor came, he found me in that state of dozing. When I came round, he asked me what was wrong with me, keeping silent about all the rest. And since at that time the troubles of the demons and the visits of our Lord continued, I only said to him, Father, it is the devil. He said to me, Do not be afraid, for it is not the devil, and if it is, Father will free you. So giving me the obedience and marking me with the sign of the cross and helping me to loosen my arms, for I felt my whole body petrified as if it had become one single piece. He managed to restore the motion of my arms and to let me open my mouth, which before I had unmovable to everything. I attributed this to the sanctity of my confessor, who was truly a holy priest. I held this almost as a miracle, so much so that I would say to myself, see, I was prepared to die because I really felt ill, and if that state had lasted, I believe I would have left life. However, I remember that I was resigned and that when I saw myself free, I felt a certain regret for not having died. So here we have Luisa, right, with these states of losing consciousness, and well, at least the confessor, which was a holy priest, was the one who was able to take her out of that state. So every time the confessor from there on, every time the confessor came, he would take her out of that state where she was petrified by doing the sign of cross. Then after the confessor went away, I remained free. I returned to the state of before. And so it happened that I spent sometimes 1 week, sometimes 15 days, and even months being surprised that state every now and then during the day, and I was able to free myself by myself. But when I was found out very frequently, as I said before, my family would then send me with a confessor, more so since they had seen that the first time I had been freed, while everyone believed that I would never again recover from that state. But then I went down to church and I returned to that state again. And so they would send me for the confessor, and then I would be freed. However, it had never crossed my mind that it would take the priest to free me from such a state, or that my malady was an extraordinary thing. It is true that when I would lose consciousness, I could see Jesus Christ, but I attributed this to the goodness of our Lord and would say to myself, see how good the Lord is toward me, that he comes to give me strength in this state of suffering. See, this is clue. He comes to give me strength, in this state of suffering. Otherwise, how could I endure it? Who would give me the strength? It is also true that when such a state was going to occur in the morning at communion, he would tell me, and in that very state, the suffering would come to me from he himself. But I would pay attention to none of this. At the mere thought sometimes of telling this to the confessor, I felt I was the proudest soul that existed in the world if I dared to open my mouth to speak of these things, of seeing Jesus Christ, and I would feel such blushing that it was impossible to say anything to that confessor as good and holy as he was. It was so true that I did not think that I would take the priest to free me, but that this was happening because of the sanctity of my confessor, that when the time came that he went away to the countryside one morning after communion, the Lord made me understand that I was going to be surprised by that state, invited me to keep him company by sharing his pains. And I immediately said to him, Lord, how am I going to do this? The confessor is not here. Who is going to free me? Maybe you want to make me die now. And the Lord told me, your trust must only be in me. Be resigned, because resignation renders the soul luminous and it keeps all other passions in their place in such a way that, attracted by those rays of light, I go into that soul and I transform her completely into myself and make her live of my own life. How beautiful, right? How Jesus tells us, just trust in me.
Be resigned, because resignation rents the soul.
Mhm.
And keeps all the passions in their place.
And also it transforms her completely into him and make her live his own life. And that is exactly where Jesus wants us all. In our pains and our sufferings and those crosses that he has given us for our own good, sharing, his pains with him, because our pains, our sufferings are not ours, are his sufferings, right? But we unite them to him, to his suffering, then it goes to a different level. It's beautiful because it repairs, it redoes, and we accompany him, and all the effects of all those sufferings of Jesus are the ones that extend to everyone, to all generations, because he is the one who does it, not us. So it's beautiful when we understand that, first of all, our sufferings should be united to his sufferings, that we should say yes to those crosses that he wants to give us, not only for our, for us to have more light in our soul, but to help him give more light to others, so they can understand that they can understand where they're at, and just reject their sinful lives, and want a new life.
And in a way, this is the state of abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
Your trust must be only in me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be detached from everything and from everyone, only looking at him and doing what he does. I resign myself to his holy will. I offer that communion as the last one of my life, and I gave the last goodbye to Jesus in the sacrament. But though resigned, I felt my nature so much that for that whole day I did nothing but cry and pray the Lord to give me strength. In truth, that situation turned out to be so very bitter to me, and without thinking or knowing, I found myself with a new and heavy cross, such that I believe it has been the heaviest I have had in my life. While I was in that state of suffering, as for me, I would think nothing but doing the will of God. On the part of my family, which also suffered in seeing me in that state, they tried to send for some priest, but one would not come because of this, another because of that. After 10 days came the confessor, who used to confess me when I was little, and it happened that he too was able to make me come round from that state. Then I realized the net in which the Lord had wrapped me. From here, a war arose against me on the part of priests. Some would say that it was a pretense, some that beating was needed, others that I wanted to make myself believe a saint. Some would add that I was possessed, and many other things such that if I wanted to tell them all, the story would be too long. So, with these ideas in their minds, when the sufferings would occur in my family, would send for one of them. They would have such strange reactions that my poor family suffered very much, especially my poor mama. How many tears she shed for me. O Lord, reward her. You yourself, O my good Lord, how much I suffered on this side. You alone know everything. So we can say how bitter the situation turned out to be for me, that the priest was needed in order to free me from that state of suffering. How many times I prayed, shedding most bitter tears, that I would free me. How many times I made explicit resistance to the Lord when He wanted me to suffer myself as victim and accept the pains. I would say to Him, Lord, promise me that you will free me yourself and that I will accept everything. Otherwise, no, I don't want to accept. And I would resist the first day, the second, and the third. But who can resist God? He would tell me so many things that in the end I was forced to submit myself to the cross. So she had her resistance, right? But then at the end she says, who can resist God? No one can. And the truth is that not only she was suffering, her family was suffering as well. So at the beginning of this part, we learned that she was given a bigger cross, right? So the Lord has a lot of crosses, and depending on the stage of our life, our spiritual journey in life is the cross that He gives us. So He started with small crosses, and then He keeps on changing it, but all of them fit perfectly to us, because that is the way that we grow in Him. I don't know if someone else has something else to say. In
He
this,
knows, he knows
go ahead.
what we need.
Mm-hmm.
Let us put all in His hands.
It's very interesting because in this stage of her life, when she needed the obedience from the confessor in order for her to come back, and some of them didn't even want to go and give her that obedience. They didn't want to go to see her and take her out of that stage. So she was there for many, many days, being petrified, not eating, nothing, until the priest came and took her out of that stage. So what a pain for her family as well, right? Let's read a little more. Other times I would say to Him from the heart and with familiarity, Lord, how it is that you have done this? How can this be? Between you and me, you wanted to put a third now, and this third one does not want to make himself available. See, we could have been so content, the two of us. When you wanted me to suffer, I would immediately accept, because I would know that you yourself would free me. There is no need for another hand now. I beg you, free me, and both of us will be more content. At times he pretended not to hear me, and he would not tell me anything. Other times then he would say to me, do not fear. I am the one who gives darkness and light. The time of the light will come. It is my usual way to manifest my works through the priests. So I spent 3 or 4 years of these contradictions on the part of priests. Many times they subjected me to very hard trials. They reached the point of letting me remain in that state of suffering that is petrified, incapable of any slightest motion, even of taking a drop of water for 18 days, more or less, when they pleased to do so. The Lord alone knows what I was going through in that state, and after they came, I would not even have the good of at least being told, have patience, do the will of God. Rather, I was reproached as capricious and disobedient. Oh God, what pain! How many tears I shed! How many times I thought I was disobedient, saying to myself, how can this be? That virtue which is the most pleasing to the Lord is so far away from me. What can a disobedient soul ever do or hope for? Many times I lamented to our Lord, and at times I reached the point of being resentful. And when He wanted me to accept suffering, I would resist as much as I could. But when the Lord saw that I would begin to resist, He showed He would not pay attention to me, and He would not tell me anything else. And then, all of a sudden, He would come to surprise me. As for what the confessor would say, then it was because sometimes He did not want me to fall into that state, because this was not in my power. It is yet true that I have been disobedient and that I have never been good at anything. But I also remember that the most tormenting pain for me was that of not being able to obey. So here we have Luisa, that the priest, if I'm understanding well, I'm not sure at this moment, that the priest wanted her not to be in that stage, right? But Jesus wanted her to be in that state. So what she was like in the middle of what Jesus wanted and what the priest wanted her to, to do. And it was like it says here that it was like for 3 to 4 years that happened. That there was a contradiction on the part of the priest, but where they were saying that she was not obedient. I'm gonna go a little further. I remember that during this period of time, there was a cholera epidemic, and one day I prayed, my good Jesus, to make this scourge cease. And He said to me, I will content you as long as you accept offering yourself to suffer whatever I want. I said to Him, Lord, no, I cannot. You know how they think. If this thing could pass only between me and you, I would have been most ready to accept everything. And He said to me, my daughter, had I paid attention to what men were thinking and to what they were going to do with me, I would not have operated the redemption of mankind, but I had my eyes fixed on their salvation and the great love that devoured me and made me act in a way that when I would see people thought ill about me and who caused the occasion to make me suffer more, I would offer those very pains that they gave me for their own salvation. So here's Jesus offering the pains that men gave Him for their own salvation. Have you forgotten that what I want from you is the imitation of my life, and that I will make you share in everything I suffered? Don't you know that the most beautiful act, the most heroic and most pleasing to me, and which you must offer to me, is that of offering yourself for the very ones who are against you? I remained mute. I did not know what to answer. I accepted everything that the Lord wanted. And so until evening, I was caught by the state of suffering, and I remained in it for 3 consecutive days. Then after I came round, I no longer heard anything about the cholera. So here we have Luisa, that she offered herself as victim in that state of suffering so that that cholera would end. And Jesus, um, Jesus made it happen. So I don't know if anyone else wants to, to say anything about this part that we have read.
Jesus always remembered that imitation of your life. Never forgot this. So we need to share every suffering, every pain, every cross for love of him. And he always remember us this. Because this is the door to open. We need to open this door to have this life in us. If we don't open the door, that is the cross, we never live in the divine will. That's why Jesus learned Luisa to live in his passion. We need to live this passion in us.
And then in that way, we will become exactly another Jesus, because we would be doing exactly what he did, offering himself, right, with those pains for the salvation of all men. Now, when we unite ourselves in his will, we are not only offering ourselves in him and with him in the divine will for salvation, but also for the sanctification of everybody in all generations. And it's beautiful to understand that he is willing to do his work in us if we open that door. Just like Patty said, we just need to open the door, and he will do the rest. And of course, trusting in what he says, and believing in what he tells us, that we are not only to imitate him, but we are going to become him with his attributes, and we will be doing exactly what he did 2,000 years ago, but it's going to extend to all generations. So this we will learn little by little, all these things that we are saying as we read. If we continue reading the book of heaven, not only stay with volume number 1, well, there's a lot of other things that the Lord is going to teach us, right?
Mirta, sometimes we believe that the cross is bad, but it is precious and necessary. It's the path of heaven and the resurrection with Jesus. So the cross, I say again, is necessary. It's great and it's beautiful. So we need to love this cross and free ourselves from us with the cross.
Well, the cross is the path to resurrection.
Yes.
Without the cross, there is no resurrection. And that Jesus teaches us with his own life, right? Which, by the way, was our life, because that's what he did. He lived our life. Okay. Anything else?
And make us detach ourselves from ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So
Anything else, Penelope, Gabi?
And he's also saying to offer ourselves for the suffering that we have, right? For the very ones who are against us. So whoever is making me suffer, I need to joyfully take that, united with the suffering of Jesus, and give it back to him for that person and for all the other ones, past, present, and future, that are doing the same thing. Not only to me, to every other person.
Exactly.
yes.
Well, we'll see you. We'll see you next Wednesday. We continue reading volume 1. Okay.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Meta. Thank you.